Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It is February 4th, 2025. This is the reorganization, if you will, of the Finance Committee of the Amherst Town Council. I'm going to ask the members of the council and also the non-voting members to say that they can hear and be heard. I'll call on you to the best of my ken in alphabetical order. Councillor Haneke.
Present.
Bob Hegner.
Present.
Kathy Shane.
I'm here.
Andy Steinberg.
Present.
Bernie Kubiak. Tom Porter.
Present.
And is Alicia not here?
Yeah, I texted her just now, but that's correct. She's not here.
Okay. So the floor at this point is open for nominations for the position of chair of the Finance Committee. Bob Hegner.
Yes, I want to nominate Kathy Shane. And I want to also state that I am not running again for finance chair because I think it's time for someone else to take over.
Kathy, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Bob.
All right. Are there any other nominations at this time? Kathy, would you like to say anything?
Sure. I'm delighted to be able to take on this role. I think, as everyone knows, I've been on the committee since the council started. I'm just gonna, Alicia, I see Alicia's just joined.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you.
Hi, Alicia, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have gone through the beginning of the process of the nominations for Chair of Finance, and Kathy Shane has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? I just want to make sure that now that Alicia's joined us, we have that opportunity. Seeing none, Kathy, I'm going to now ask you to proceed.
Okay, I'll be very brief, but I was understudied to Andy and learned a phenomenal amount, and then with Bob. So this time around, I wanted to step up and take the lead as chair, which I know is a lot of work, and including just helping us stay organized. So I am happy to do so.
Okay. Given that, I'm going to ask for people to vote in favor or not, or abstain. For Kathy Shane, we'll begin with Councillor Haneke.
I vote for Councillor Shane.
Bob Hegner.
Councillor Shane.
Kathy Shane.
Kathy Shane.
Andy Steinberg.
I vote for Councillor Shane.
Alicia Walker.
I vote for Councillor Shane.
And Bernie Kubiak.
Support for Councillor Shane.
Tom Porter.
Support as well.
Okay, Kathy, I turn the meeting over to you and I go back to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And now we are open for nominations for vice chair. So I will look around the room to see if there's anyone who either would like to be vice chair or nominate themselves, or someone who wants to nominate someone to be vice chair. Seeing no hands, I will nominate Bob Hegner. Bob, I'm looking to see if anyone else has got a hand up. And I guess I need to ask you, Bob, are you willing to serve as vice chair?
Yes, I'm willing to serve.
Does anyone else either want to nominate someone or nominate themselves? Seeing no hands, Bob, as Lynn did, would you like to say a few words?
Just that, I've served as the chair for the last year, and I've tried to give everyone a voice on the committee, and I will continue to do so as vice chair under Kathy's leadership.
Thank you. So seeing no hands up, I will go around the room to get the votes of everyone. And instead of doing it alphabetically, it's easier for me to do it by the order of the faces I see on my screen. So first is Andy Steinberg,
I vote for Bob Hegner.
Kathy Shane, I vote for Bob. Mandy,
I vote for Counselor Bob Hegner.
Bob,
I vote for Bob Hegner.
Tom Porter,
I support the vote for Bob Hegner.
Bernie Kubiak,
Support Mr. Hegner.
and Counselor Walker.
I vote for Counselor Bob Hegner.
So I think I got everyone on the screen and it's unanimous. And Lynn, I see you asked to be put back in the audience. I am not sure who I don't think I'm host, so that would be, Melissa will have to do that. So jumping in my role as chair, I did I did for once print out the agenda. Which I usually just look at on the screen, but I have a hard time looking at faces on the screen. So we've set it up where we are first hearing public comment, and then we'll get to what's on the agenda for the day. So we are now open for public comment. And Melissa, since I don't have control, I don't think I see one hand is up.
Yeah, so I just allowed them in to talk, if
Okay.
that's okay.
Perfect. Arlie, you've joined the room and you can talk. I think you're unmuted, so go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. And as I think everyone knows, it's up to 3 minutes, and please identify yourself.
Arlie Gould, South Amherst. So I keep hearing over and over that the town council has no more authority or jurisdiction over the Jones Library project. The money has been approved, so that's that. Okay, so now the library doesn't seem to have their share of the money to put into the project. At the last trustees meeting, I heard the report that they have 10 million and, you know, they need close to 14 million. And I was also told by a friend that this 10 million includes 2 million of pledges, which they haven't received yet, and the federal 2 million. So that they actually have 6 million right now. And now the town manager says that he will not sign a contract until he has proof that the library has all their money. So little old me out here in the public, a tax-paying citizen, has to wonder. So one person is going to decide if the library can meet its financial obligation. And I don't know what would constitute proof in this person's mind. If any part of the town council has authority and jurisdiction over this aspect of the project, it would seem to be this committee. You know, the issue that my friends and neighbors are very concerned about is that the library won't have enough money and the town will have to, you know, approve more money to keep the project going. That the town council has every right to be involved in this aspect of the project just seems to be common sense, because if the library doesn't have enough money, it's the town and the taxpayers that are going to foot the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Orly. I think that is it for public comments. So we can move on to the agenda for today. And the first part, you're in charge of, Melissa. We have the first quarter financials, health insurance projections, and cherry seat projections. And I think everyone in the committee Melissa let us know that the first quarter was in our packet, and just so you know, I just logged on just before the meeting, and I see that the minutes that we're going to be looking at were put in the packet. They weren't there, I don't think, this morning. So Melissa, go ahead.
You're muted, Melissa, but we see your Zoom.
We
I-
see your Zoom, but not, if you're trying to show a screen, we're not.
Yeah, we just see your
It's funny.
connect to
'cause
Zoom window.
I don't want to share that. All right, let's see. I don't think that's my, if it is my share, I don't.
It
Oh,
says it's Bob
Bob.
Hegner's share.
Yeah, so that's why I can't take it down.
So Bob, can you unshare your screen?
I didn't mean to do that.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bob.
I just hit a random key.
Okay. I'm gonna close that and then I'm gonna do share. So now can you see the report?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
and if you could move in on it more to make it somewhat more readable. I think that's better. How is that for others?
I can see it.
Okay, we're good, Melissa.
Okay. Are we ready for me to scroll down?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I think, well, I guess I should speak for myself. I think most of us had a chance to look at this, so
Okay.
maybe you want to do as you're scrolling, give a summary of what we're seeing or what the take homes are from first quarter. And just, yeah.
So it's easier for me to look at the data. That's just the way my brain works. So, but I guess what the takeaway from the first quarter is that things are you know, kind of where we expect them to be. There are several departments that are more than 25% of the way through their expended budget, but that is based on normal timing in the departments. For example, like Cherry Hill, that season, you know, is in the summer and the spring, so they spend and use their money, you know, at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then they're sort of on break right now until they start up again, you know, in the spring again. The Medicare reimbursements, they only come in twice a year, and so that's why, you know, there's not a whole lot to see there. Motor vehicle, the commitment one is billed in, you know, February, March timeframe, and so I would say that 85% of all motor vehicle bills are collected in the early spring, late winter. So you won't see a whole lot of motor vehicle excise collected in during that time. There's a summary of kind of where we are with hotel, motel, and the pilot is, you know, most of the stuff from our internal pilot payments that we call pilot payments from our enterprises, we transfer that in the first quarter. So that's why it gets front loaded in the fiscal year. Expenditures are, you know, right on track at 25% for the departments that are heavily based on salaries and us, you know, expending, you know, biweekly to our rates. But several departments, again, recreation, like the pools and the Cherry Hill, they're seasonal, so their seasons impact the spending of the budget accordingly. departments like information technology, all of our renewals of our software that we use, those payments are due in July. All of our assessments are due at the beginning of the fiscal year. Our interfund transfers are done at the beginning of the fiscal year, so they show up as revenue in one fund and expenses in the others. And the way that the library is structured, they also pay an assessment, so their assessment is charged for the full fiscal year of their for their employee benefits, but they also use the general fund portion of the library budget before their grant, so it will spend faster at the beginning of the year. Enterprises, similar experience. We charge them their assessments for their fringe benefits and other interfund transfers at the beginning of the year, so they front load those. We front load those expenditures. And then this is just the detail of the individual departments. Revenue sources, kind of where we are. If there's any in particular that you want to ask about, feel free, and we will do our best to get you an answer.
Bob,
Yeah, Melissa, I wanted to ask about debt service, which is on the last line on the first
Mhm.
page of the expenditures or the budget report.
So our debt is paid twice a year.
Okay.
And so there's like 2 payments a year, and I'm pretty sure that there's some debt payments due in March and some due in it's not evenly spaced. It's twice a year. There's a full principal payment, and then there's a principal. There's a principal and interest payment, and then an interest payment. This $1,500 is probably something that's off cycle from other borrowings, because we borrow all of our stuff at once, and then that makes that due date fall in the same month of the borrowing. So if we borrowed money last March, which I know we did, the first payment would probably be due this coming March for the principal and interest, and there'd be an interest payment due. So it's a 6-month stagger for that. And so it kind of hits all at once.
Does that include, it doesn't include it, or does that include the elementary school, or that hasn't shown up yet?
That hasn't shown up yet, I don't think. We borrowed that in the spring, in March. So I don't know the exact payment date, but it's probably due March, April range. It's usually around 12 months from the borrowing date, but sometimes they move the payment date by 30 days, just depends.
Mhm.
But once it's set into its schedule, that's when it will be paid.
Okay, thank you.
Mandy, your hand is up.
Thank you. 2 questions.
Mhm.
In your summary, Melissa, you indicated that like short-term rental revenues are included in the hotel and meals payments from the state.
Mhm.
Do we get any sort of breakdown from the state as to which are short-term versus hotel? In a way that we would be able to figure out whether, if we looked at advertisements of short-term rentals in our town, we'd be able to see if they're paying them or have registered for a rental registration permit and things like that, or do we not get even any breakdown at all?
So I can look into that for you.
Okay.
I used to receive those payments in my previous job, but I'm not the person processing them, and I don't recall that ever being broken out separately, but that doesn't mean things haven't changed since I was the person that took that out. But my understanding is that they don't break it out in a way that we can share. but I can look to see if that's been improved or what the receipt looks like. But in the past, it would just come in as one number, hotel motel. But I also didn't work in a community that had the number of Airbnbs or other alternative short-term rentals. The community, it was very, there are only a handful, so if that. So it may be different here.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm,
My
mhm.
next question is with the expenses on the wastewater treatment plant, the sewer
Mhm,
fund.
mhm.
You mentioned that they're high because of encumbrances for year-long stuff, presumably
Mhm.
some stuff where you contract for the year's provision of, say, chlorine or something. But
Well, and that's also that you did that big adjustment for the sludge. So we
Mm.
haven't paid all that out yet, but know that those costs are rising, right? So that's
okay,
a big part of it.
I guess my question was last year, that was one of the funds that was sort of over.
Mhm.
And it seems a lot higher than the water fund sort of total expenses at this point in a way.
Right.
And so are we worried about that one being over this year?
Well,
After
so
this quarter, or is that sort of number a similar number that we see in terms of the encumbrances and all after the first quarter on a typical year?
So I know that the reason that encumbrance is almost $1 million is that sludge that went up significantly. And I don't believe, and Holly can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that the transfer into the wastewater treatment plant of that 250,000 shows in the budget until next quarter. And so that will make it look less, not great, but it won't look as skewed as a 50% increase because that's a significant, I believe it was 200 to 250,000 that we transferred in for that sludge contract.
Thank you.
Mhm. Holly probably can correct me on my
So
stuff
Holly,
here.
do you want to speak to this before I go to Andy?
I'm not going to necessarily correct you, but I am going to say that the water and sewer funds, particularly the sewer fund, excuse me, particularly the sewer fund, will likely have troubles staying within its budget again this year. The aging infrastructure at the wastewater treatment plant, pipes, pumps, motors, just the cost of repairs and the age of the equipment, the repairs are, um, you know, uh, much higher than we anticipated. So I would say that that is one that we're going to have to follow very closely through the second half of the fiscal year to make sure that they could stay within their budget. But Melissa is correct. The town council orders adding the additional $250,000 for the sludge, and there was also one, I believe it was $20,000 for the solid waste fund, were not voted until January, so those will actually not be shown in this report. Excuse me, until the third quarter.
So, and Mandy, are you following up on the same issue, or should I go to Andy?
Yeah, I was going to. I guess my question is this something that we should be considering, and could we legally consider a change in sewer rates mid-year? I mean, I guess we're past mid-year, but I don't know whether legally we can change rates more than once a year, but is it something we should be considering?
So I don't know legally or not legally. I know that what we have been looking at as we prepare for the budget is, what we anticipate the increased costs are in these departments. And we've had internal meetings to talk about where we think where the rates should be based on true expenditures and foreseen incoming costs. So while I don't think that we would change it mid-year, we certainly are talking about it right now about what it should be next year and in the years to come to sort of cover these costs and deal with the infrastructure that needs to be maintained in the wastewater treatment plant. And it certainly is, to your point, a more obvious problem in the wastewater treatment sewer fund, and while still there in the water fund, it's not as extreme or as urgent. You know, it doesn't, it's not rise, the costs aren't rising as quickly.
Andy,
Just to follow up on what Mandy was just asking, and then to ask one other question. I think that my recollection of this question of changing rates mid-year, that we've never had to face it because as long as there are retained earnings or fund balance within the fund itself, that there's no reason to consider making it unless the deficit is so large. And I was just wanting to see if that recollection of policy is correct, and just add it to the conversation if so.
that would be, you know, I think of it as reserves, but that, Andy
Yeah.
said, you know, these funds are carrying reserves in them. So I think the question, Melissa or Holly, is, are there enough reserves that without a rate increase, we'll be able to cover, without a mid-year rate increase, will we be able to cover whatever you anticipate or re-anticipating the costs?
I think that we'll be fine. I mean, unfortunately, we've had to deal with this the last several fiscal years, over and over, trying to find a way. I would, you know, dare say since COVID and a lot of the, you know, businesses and colleges being shut down, we've had a hard time kind of recouping the revenues. The revenues and the consumption seem to be doing a little better this year. But it's still just a little bit early to tell. I think that, you know, we'll be fine. I'm not certainly recommending, you know, any changes to rates at this point. Andy is correct. If the revenues fall short of what we anticipate, but the expenditures still are as high as they were budgeted, we could use our retained earnings to fill that gap in the revenues to meet the expenditure level. I mean, we certainly cannot go over on our expenditures. That's you know, not allowed. If our revenues are short, we can take it from retained earnings to increase that. I'll have to double check on the retained earnings figure, because we did use some, and I don't think I've calculated that in quite yet, but I can do a rough calculation on that. I think we'll be fine. It's just going to be a struggle, but we'll get there.
So, Andy, your hand is still up.
Yeah, it is up because I actually was originally raised my hand to ask a different question, but I was following Mandy's line briefly with the other question I asked. What I was going to ask about is the cannabis revenue. And the reason that I'm always concerned about cannabis revenue is that we know we have said that we estimate at the end of the year, after certification of free cash, the amount of the cannabis revenue is what we would base normally our suggestion of a transfer to the to that particular fund, stabilization fund. So I was looking at the number, and as always, we don't put in an estimated amount because we never know have enough information to make an estimate for the budget purposes. So then it gets to the question of whether 12,000 and change is lower than in previous years, and whether there's any trend in cannabis tax that we should be aware of so that we bear it in mind for the future discussion I referenced.
So I do think it's lower than, like, it dropped significantly from fiscal 24 to fiscal, I mean, from fiscal 23 to fiscal 24 when we made that transfer. And sort of what I understand is that, you know, cannabis sort of took off in the early years of it being legalized, and it has really sort of slowed to a much more, it doesn't produce revenue in Amherst or anywhere else in Massachusetts at the level it was in the beginning. It's
I think that the other question that's been on my mind is whether a number of retail establishments and the success of the retail establishments within Amherst has been diminishing, and whether it's something that we just have to expect. But I'll leave it to my colleagues to see if they have any further questions along these lines. Thank you.
Bob, Paul, did you want to speak to this before I go to Bob?
Sure. Yes, I think Andy's absolutely right that, you know, the revenues are going down and the host community agreements are being not enforced as much by the Cannabis Control Commission. So I think it's a small number, but it's something we're tracking.
Bob?
Yeah, so last year, I think we got 77,000 in revenue for cannabis. This year, if that's, if the first quarter is an indication, we're going to be closer to 50,000. So I do think it's going down, and I do think we have to ask the question whether the Reparations Stabilization Fund will, whether it's sufficient. 50,000 is sufficient to fund that.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, Melissa, you could take it down. I have a more general question about quarterly. I went back because my sense was we were not getting quarterly reports at the same time during the year, or roughly the same time as in earlier years. And by this time in the past, we had second quarter, by the first or second week in February, we had it. So I'm just wondering whether, what's your best guess on second and third? Because as you put it out, as we get further in the year, we get a better sense of how we're running on revenues and expenses. And my
so
my only other question is, there something that has changed that's making it harder for you and the staff and Holly and everyone to do it, that we should know about?
So to answer your question about when to expect, the second quarter is drafted, and we'll probably have it for you at the next meeting. The reason it's not complete right now is we still haven't done the transfers for the investment income. We have to allocate the investment income to their specialized funds so that the report reflects the appropriate balance in each fund. So you should have that at your next meeting, whenever that is, assuming in 2 weeks. I mean, I'll take, I guess I didn't understand that I was supposed to do this. So I didn't do the first quarter because I didn't know. And so I will, I having done it for the first time for this quarter, with Holly's help, I will say that the way that in order to present it in the way that you've always seen it in the past, it takes a good amount of time to manipulate the data as it comes out of our database into a presentation that is consistent with how that information has been displayed in the past. We have a couple nuanced funds that require us to take the data and then, for example, like, the most obvious is our school department. We have two different school departments. We have our regional school department and we have our Amherst School Department. And so the Amherst School Department is in the general fund, but it shows in a different fund category because they operate autonomously from the town, meaning under the school committee. And so we have to back out of a transfer and put in that additional information. It's a small change, but that means I can't export a report from Munis and let it run. I have to hand key in all this data. And the second thing is that there's a couple categories where it reports in a summary in one line, but we have in history always broken those sublines out. And so to continue showing it that way takes a little bit of extra time. And, of course, it being my first time, it took me a little longer because I was learning the process. And of course, I transposed, a couple of different numbers before I got it right. And Holly had to explain to me the certain nuances that are Amherst. So to the point of why it took so long, I'll own that. I didn't know I needed to do it. And the second is the process to maintain the same level of detail that you've always received in the past takes a little extra effort. We can't just print a report and send it to you.
Thank you. And, I was more just finding out if there's a systems issue and makes this hard. So Holly's up and hand is up and Paul's hand is up as I've asked my more global question rather than as something happened, or is this very difficult to produce? Holly and Paul, whichever order.
I will go first. Melissa is throwing herself under the bus for me. This was not necessarily a job that she was aware of or that she knew. I can't even historically tell you whether it was the finance director or the comptroller, but it has been my job lately. But I unfortunately have been buried, and it has been it's been less important than other duties that I've had to do. So the reason it is late is completely my fault, not necessarily Melissa's fault. That is on me. And again, it is because it's a simple report, but it does take a little bit of time to manipulate it and make sure that we have all of the numbers correct. And as Melissa was saying, the collector's office who allocates out the interest literally would just be getting bank statements last week through December. So it can't happen until typically around the 10th or the 15th of the month following the end of the quarter so that we can get all of the interest allocations and the numbers out to the right fund. So second quarter hopefully will be more or less on schedule at this point. And it is not Melissa's fault, it is mine.
I think it's useful. It informs the budget process is the reason I was asking. See, Andy's hand is up and Paul's, Paul, do you want to continue
Sure.
on?
Yes, I would. So I think there's two things here, and it was great to have Melissa's fresh eyes on this because she said, wow, this is a very time-intensive report to put together for the town, for the finance committee. What Northampton does is they run a report out of Munis. There's no narrative or anything like that. We can do that. It's not very consumer friendly, but it gets out in a timely manner. So I think we hold ourselves to a higher standard than that because I think for especially a citizen committee, I think people expect to have some kind of interpretation of what it means. And so we do put effort into that. Melissa and Holly have worked hard to get this one together. And then there's always double checking because we are literally typing in all these numbers a second time coming out of the system. We can't export it the way we thought we would like to. And Melissa's looking at this with IT. Is there a simpler way to produce it? Right now it isn't, but we will have a schedule and we'll let you know when you will get the report. And we'll meet that deadline of when we'll get them. There's certain times it's usually be like 5 weeks or 6 weeks after the end of the quarter. And we'll set that as a standard for us to meet going forward.
Thank you. Andy.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question that picks up on something you said, Melissa, that segues into a conversation that we're going to have in a couple minutes, but you had mentioned elementary school as being a town department, but and where that fits it. And I guess that I was curious to know a little bit more about whether there are any expenses regarding elementary school budget that are reflected within the quarterly report that we're looking at. And I think in particular, several people have raised the question with me as to whether any school retirement or OPEB expenses are included under the other local assessments.
So this right here is the elementary school budget. And so this is something that we manually put in because that's run. If I was to export the Munis report, this information comes on a completely different report. Just so that you understand, it's the 1,000 is our town general funds, 1,500 is the elementary school general fund. And so this is what we have to manually key in here. And so this is how much they have spent, 3 million of their $26 million budget thus far in Q1. So that's where you would see that in this quarterly report. But their health insurance and that kind of stuff, just like town, it's that they're building that into that 26, whereas we're pulling it, we give you the detail of all of our different departments. The elementary school has departments in their budget as well, but that's not something we report on on the town side because we don't have, we can see it, but we're not the ones who are saying when we're spending different amounts for whatever department segments they have within that 1,500 fund. Did I explain that? I feel like I didn't explain that very well.
Yeah, no, I think you did. The only other question I'd have is back to where I was before, which is towards the very bottom where it says retirement, other local assessments includes retirement, OPEB, et cetera. Whether any of those expenses are expenses that are related to the elementary schools.
You want to take that, Holly?
Excuse me. Having a little trouble with my voice today. So the elementary schools retirement assessment is part of the town's retirement assessment. Their OPEB and any expenditures that they have on the elementary school side are all completely in their fund 1,500. So I think that just a very abbreviated way of explaining it is, according to our books, we have spent $26 million on the schools. We transferred all the money to them and it's spent, but obviously they don't spend it all on day one. They spend it slowly over a 12-month period. So that's an adjustment that we have to back out because we show the full $26 million spent in the first quarter. They're clearly spending it as it goes down. That's the short of that one. Again, the retirement assessment is in there, but OPEB and other things are going to be in there. Her health insurance costs, the town's appropriation costs and all that is going to be within their budget. So my guess is that they must, again, they report to the school committee. The school committee is in charge of the budget. Their school committee is the one who authorizes payments out of their budget. So my assumption is that they must be doing some sort of report back to the school committee. We don't report on that in a detailed fashion at all. That is something that the school would do to the school committee. And it may be something that, the town would be interested in requesting and finding out and seeing, but it's nothing that we've ever, at least as far as I'm aware, it's nothing that we've ever seen before. It's reported to the school committee.
Andy, did that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on budgeting? You know, Paul, you know, in terms of the quarterly reports, at least I would welcome if there's particular kinds of changes that would make it less staff time and, you know, if the numbers aren't ready, the numbers aren't ready. But if it's the notion that we're retyping numbers is a little bit scary to me in a budget process, you know, as opposed to be able to download a number. So if there are improvements, go for it, in my opinion.
Agree.
Thank
So
you,
I
will do.
So the next two items are both reports from health insurance projections and cherry sheet projections.
So I'll initiate. So when we last spoke, and this, we'll be discussing this with the budget coordinating group tomorrow. When we last had our projection, we said there were two things that we're waiting for at the end of January. One was the governor's budget and the other is health insurance. So we have bad news on health insurance. The increase that has been given to us is 19.92%, which is the top range that Maya has, which actually tells you that we probably deserve a higher percentage increase, but it's been capped. That's a significant number. You know, this is not good news for the town, nor for the school department or the library. We have a and so what do we do about this large increase? And why do we have the increase? First off, because we are utilizing health insurance at a higher rate than what we're paying to the company entitles us to. Basically, they're losing money on every member of our town and our school district. So they're trying to make that loss ratio more in line with whatever they expect to be. In order to make that loss ratio better, you either use less services or you increase rates. The only tool they have is to increase rates. What are we doing about that we can control? We have the state law requires us to have an insurance advisory committee, which is made up of all the collective bargaining units in the town and the schools, along with non-union employees and town staff. And we meet pretty regularly with them to update them on what health insurance. This is a shared problem between employees and the organizations, i.e. school, library, and town, because the employees also, their percentage went up as well. The tools that we have are to go out to bid for a different company. We don't think that that would make a significant difference because our claims are our claims. People are going to look at what our existing rate of use is, and they're going to price accordingly. We can have a less rich plan, which is the focus of our conversation tomorrow, is to say, where can we increase deductibles? Where can we increase copays? Can we adjust the plan benefits in some way that would lower the cost? And that will lower the cost. You know, there's a, you know, you do item X and it reduces your rates by 1%. So I think we have already had that conversation with the Insurance Advisory Committee. They seem to recognize the need to do this. For the town bargaining units, it's a pretty much a conversation. I believe with the school bargaining units, it's actually an item of mandatory bargaining. I'm not positive about that, but I think we've been trying to work through a consensus model with all the employees to say this actually makes sense for everybody. So we will have that conversation with our labor groups tomorrow. And that will probably continue over several weeks as we try to sort through what the impact is and what the various changes that we'll put on the table and they will suggest will be. The goal is to reduce the percentage lower than 19%, and because it can't get worse, and do the best we can on addressing this gigantic impact on our budgets. Melissa, do you want to add anything?
No, not really. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. I mean, the hit to the budgets, like Paul said, is going to be difficult for all of the groups. So it hits us all, meaning the library, both school areas and the town side equally. And I'm sure that the school department is, trying to figure out right now what they're going to do on to adapt to this increase, because it is certainly more than we had hoped. And I know that for us, we're not entirely sure at this time, how to manage that within the town's, budget just yet, given what the increases in revenue are, and the increases for this health insurance is significant. And hopefully we can get it down a little bit, but it's going to be significant either way. And that comes at the cost of something. It comes at the cost of doing something else. And that's just the reality for not only the town, but the school and the library. So,
Yeah, and just so you know, we had budgeted, we have been putting in 13% in our working numbers. So this is higher than what that number was. So the closer we can get to 13%, the better off we will be. So we had already factored in the 13%, as did the schools. So it's really that delta between 13 and 19.92 that we're working through.
Mandy and then Bob is what the order I see.
A couple of questions. The percentage is awful. It's hard to get a gist on how awful it is when we're not talking raw numbers as compared to the 2.5% increase in the budget. So what is that total, that 19% increase in raw numbers? How much more will we be, I don't expect you to maybe know the answer now, but how much more is that from last year? And then I can look at what the Prop 2.5 is and see how much of that Prop 2, of the 2.5 property tax increase is it subsuming? Like, is it subsuming more than 100%? Is it subsuming 80% of that increase? I'm just trying to get my head around how much is left of the typical increase, or that 3%, or if we talk about the 3% we've already sort of agreed on amongst the four, in that operating revenues, how much of that raw number is the healthcare, and is it more than that raw number? That's question number one. Question number two is, Paul, you seem to indicate that the agreement to change healthcare plans is not a bargaining for the town, but it is within bargaining for potential, or you think it might be within bargaining for the schools. If that's the case, and the schools can't bargain that, is there any type of circumstance where the town would have a separate sort of insurance plan than the schools because of how all of that works?
Yeah, so it is something we, if I may, Kathy. So that is, we've had that conversation, because we're looking at everything's on the table. We have some rough numbers, I think, but I think we'd like to give you precise numbers in terms of the property tax increase versus the dollar amounts, because that will be more real to you, I know. I think we try to work through a consensus model with our labor partners across the board. We don't really know what it would look like if one unit went off and sought insurance by itself. I'm sure the region could do that if they so chose. They're a separate governmental entity. They could seek their own, but I think they try to keep their all of their members in both the elementary and the region together. And so this is but we don't know if that would look like. So I think our first tack is to work with our collective bargaining partners and try and say, we all understand this is a problem, because it impacts our employees across the board. So that's our first take.
Bob?
I had a lot of the same questions that Councilor Haneke had. The only other question I have is, and I think this is implied by what you said, Paul, is if we were able to change the policies to increase deductions or deductibilities or things like that, would we be able to see some savings in this fiscal year, or would it be next fiscal year that we see the savings?
So it's plan design is the thing that's on the table. So that's something we have a fair amount of control over. The savings would happen on July 1. That's when the new rates go into effect. Enrollment happens in April, I believe, when we have our open enrollment period, and then we get to see how the head count. And sometimes there's some drift. People look at it. The other thing we look at is we look at what the Group Insurance Commission is offering, and that is the primary insurer for the University of Massachusetts and all government, state government. We're below that even with this increase, but that often, we often have people who are employed by both entities, and they can choose which insurance, one partner in one place, one partner in the other. So all those things are on the table. We need to compare all that data. This is relatively new information for us, and we just shared all the information with our members of the Insurance Advisory Committee a few minutes ago.
But if I understand correctly, then we're stuck with 19.92% this fiscal year.
No. But that can change.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the number we want to chip down.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So Paul, I want to just jump in on, you said it's use. I'm assuming that you're getting somewhat below the total use level. So if you broke it out into pharmaceuticals versus hospital, everyone expected a jump back up in hospital because COVID, people postponed any elective surgery. No one wanted to go to the hospital that didn't have to go to the hospital. And the hospital wasn't taking them. So we knew that was going to jump up, but we've got a bunch of new drugs on the market that are zooming in terms of use. So are they giving you enough detail that if the plan design discussion starts, it can be laser focused rather than what would typically go up on a deductible, as opposed to treat something differently?
Yeah, so we share our claims data with our insurance advisory team, so the committee, so they can look at it. We look at the large users, the top 10, top 20. Those are capped. There's reinsurance for all those large users. If you get a person who's spending, whose care costs $500,000, $600,000 a year, that's all capped. So that's taken out because that's the benefit of being in a larger pool. What the insurance companies have found that yes, insurance jumped up right after COVID. I mean, medical use jumped up after COVID, but it didn't go down. It stayed up, much like construction costs. It jumped back up after COVID, and then it just stayed. And so it's stuck. There's additional costs being incurred by a lot of the hospitals, especially the large hospitals in Boston, with new collective bargaining agreements with the nurses, and just that everything is costing more, all the hard devices and things like that. So I think that there's a lot of things. We have some drugs that are being utilized. It's the first time that, what I've been told in history, that there's been a very expensive drug that's also had wide usage. These are weight loss drugs that are multiple thousands of dollars a month at times, and usually it's a high cost drug that's limited usage, or a widely used drug with low cost. This is the first time there's a high cost drug with high usage, and that's part of the pharmaceuticals plus cancer treatments, etc.
Thank you. Bernie.
Hey, Paul, I'm assuming that the pharmacy schedule under the insurance policies the town buys is similar to the one that I have under the GIC, which is there's a range. So that the more expensive drugs, there's a greater copay for the more expensive drugs.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, the brand name drugs, we steer people away from them to generics and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the first bad news story, and then you have the second one to tell us, right?
So the cherry sheet projections, Melissa?
Yeah. So
not necessarily bad news.
Okay,
no, they're just not as good as, they don't fix the problem. How about that?
Yeah.
So I prepared a little something, and it is in your packet, but I put it in there just this morning. So I'm going to share my screen again. And what I did is I took our our trends that we have presented in the past, and I just added the 26 estimates to these to our state aid, versus our assessment versus our net aid. And so what you can see here is that the increase this year, when you get to the net of it, it's like $117,000, and I'll show you that as I go further down these slides. But it's a fairly small increase. A lot based on the fact that the increase to the receipts is quite good. I believe just over 500,000, but the increase to the assessments is over 400,000. So that's how we end up with not as much surplus to be added to next year's. It's not as big of an increase to next year's revenue as we might as hope, because you can see that's less than 1% of the overall in the net increase to the town. And I also did, this here, Chapter 70, school tuition, unrestricted aid is the lion's share of it, similar to what we've presented in the past. But you can see that the increase in the assessments is what's driving, what was a fairly decent increase from in revenue. The increase in the assessments is so much greater by percentage that we only end up with the small increase overall. And this is by each category, and this is from from the DLS website, and you can see that we have a significant, a small increase in Chapter 70, a 2.2% increase in unrestricted aid, and those are our two big numbers. There's a big increase in charter tuition reimbursement, but that is, as you know, just a portion of what we had paid out in previous years for charter reimbursement. And that charter reimbursement does sort of stay just like, it doesn't go directly to the school. And then, veteran benefits, that's really about veterans, how much benefits we're giving to veterans. So an increase there doesn't really, isn't really, it's an offset of a portion of the money we're spending, or that we spent last year. And the same with the exemptions. We get a portion of that back. And then you can see that the big drivers in the assessment are, regional transportation, which is going up a significant amount, and that's for our PVTA, our portion of the PVTA assessment. And what's new this year that we didn't see last year is a charge for special ed. And then we have a significant increase in both charter sending tuition and choice sending tuition, which is what's, that money out, is what's, making up the difference here. So.
I'm looking for hands. Maybe I'll jump in. Is the cherry sheet you showed us just for municipal, and there's a separate one for the regional school?
There absolutely is a separate one for the regional school.
Okay, so let's first, if there are any questions on this, and then find out what the regional school side look like. Bernie?
Yeah, these are, of course, the governor's numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can hold out hope that
that they go up.
That it go. Well, typically it does go up, but how much it goes up is always a guess. But that doesn't mean that. Means this is a start. Not great news, but it's a start.
Mandy.
State-owned land. Even for the year. So that's clearly we're in a hold harmless with this new formula that they came out with and talked about at MMA, and what are we gonna do to, push the state on that?
I guess I'm not, what do you mean? I'm not sure what your question is.
I guess it's in the last couple years that state-owned land number has
Oh, state-owned
increased
land.
50 some thousand a year, somewhere between 20 to 50,000 a year, and it's being held at a 0% increase this year. Despite all the building going on, despite everything, we knew it would be bad after MMA, but what can we do to, and should we be doing to, fix that problem is, I guess, is what I
Mhm.
would say. I mean, it's a problem.
Yeah, no, I think it's a political solution. I think you're absolutely right. It's the one thing that would make the biggest difference to us. The focus of the state tends to be on not land, not buildings, and that's the sweet spot for us. And there's not a, I mean, we have had those conversations, and I think every counselor, every administrator should be, hammering at the state, which we do, and continue to have our state officials who have been true advocates for us to continue to push this. And I think we have strong voices in this House and Senate now, so I think that can make hopefully they'll be more persuasive.
Andy.
I was going to say pretty much what Paul said, which is why I pulled my hand down in the end. We've had this discussion in the Fiscal Policy Committee at the MMA, and it's a difficult issue because, well, there has been reform in the state-owned land pilot. It has really been driven by concern of communities that had been the way the state-owned land that is just land is valued, and that there were a few communities that had very unusually high returns for the amount of land they had, because they're like Cape Cod communities that had very expensive property. And so there was an effort to try and do more for some of these very small towns that have tremendous tracts of state-owned land. And that was where a lot of the state budget increase in state-owned land came from. But since they were only still valuing land and not buildings or uses of the land, they have not done that. It has never inured to our benefit. I have tried, and we've gotten some language within the MMA policy to pursue this issue on behalf of towns where there is a substantial impact on the community from the state-owned land that is much greater than the value of the land without any buildings on it. But I think that it is a political question that is going to take a lot of time to actually see if there's any movement within it. And it is a discussion that we should be and are having with our own legislative delegation. That's really the only thing I could add.
Any other comments on this? Okay.
So
And Melissa, you said you either put it in the packet or you will put it in the packet.
Yeah, I put it in the packet.
Okay.
And I think there's one other thing we want to mention which in reviewing the council's budget guidelines, Melissa's been working on local receipts and looking at what those numbers can do within our professional judgment are safe to say. And do you want to talk about some of the adjustments that you're making on that, Melissa?
Yeah, sure. So I don't really have the projections ready to show here just because I feel like so many things are changing in the past week or so with the new information we've gotten and just sort of different environments. But taking your what the council put in its guidelines into account, the areas in which I adjusted some things were the motor vehicle went up slightly. The interest income went up significantly. The permits and licensings went up a good amount. And I feel like there was one other a line that I went up a little bit, and everything else kind of stayed within, a percentage or two that we usually move it. But those were the areas that I thought that we could move a little bit on.
Hotel, motel.
Hotel, motel, maybe,
Yep.
yeah.
Mhm.
So the other thing is that Holly has gone into the retirement assessment, and when going through the detail of that, the actual assessment to the town portion versus the enterprises was slightly different. And also I had put in our estimated number with the total assessment that the retirement board charges us. We do receive a discount if we pay the bill in advance in July, which is our practice. And so when we take into that into consideration, there was a significant savings in that line. So we were able to, what I think we're able to do is push the percentage of increase to the 4 towns to 3.5. I'm pretty
Not to the
sure
to our 4 departments.
to our 4 departments, yeah. To 3.5. So that's where I think we are with that. But, we're still looking at it, and like Bernie said, if the numbers from the state, get better, if we get more information about something else that was stronger, then maybe we can look at that. I will say that I'm, of course, the only place that we can really move estimates it is those local receipts, which is a very small portion of our revenue source. And so, and I'm uncomfortable moving them much more than we are right now, given the political environment and what that means for the economics of the future, which, might be great, might not be great. I just don't know that. I mean, I think this is uncharted territory, and I'm of the cautious nature. So that's I'll just say that. And I think it's, prudent for us to be safe in an unknown environment.
So
Because
just to frame that. So tomorrow at the BCG meeting, we'll be talking about a 3.5% increase instead of 3% increase. But I think what Melissa's done is looked over 20 years back history to say, what does it look like? And I think that's been really instructive, looking at a long period of time. So that's a piece of good news. It's not fantastic. It's not huge amounts of money, but we're looking everywhere.
I'm looking for any hands on that, because this is actually a good segue into the next item on the agenda. Bernie.
If memory serves, there's we can be in considerable difficulty if we miss on our local revenue assessments and have to and don't collect what we say we're going to collect. That rolls into the next year, and so it's not a question of, well, we guessed wrong. It's a question of, we guessed wrong and now we have to pay again. So I understand the caution and concern about local receipts. They don't have the data in front of me, so I can't go back over 20 years and see how frequently or how reliably these repeat. But the only thing that we can truly count on in terms of the town's budget is getting something like 98% of the property tax revenue. So anytime we start uh, maneuvering around the edges, we're taking a risk, and people just need to acknowledge that.
So because I did it, I'll share it with you, Bernie. So this is our investment income. And I will say that in this particular graph, I did truncate. I want to make this bigger. I don't know how it shows for you on the screen. But I did truncate off 24 because 24 goes like off the chart. And so it's not that I want to hide that, but I wanted to show the variation in the 20 years leading up to when the investment income spiked. And so you can see that we've never had investment income above 500,000 until we hit 22, 23, and 24, where it went, admittedly just off the chart by comparison. And I will say that I did some, my memory serves back in 2004 and 2005 and 2006. That's when I could get, 8 and 9% CDs. So that's what I remember from my days of working in a treasury department. And so, now we're getting around 5, and it's going to between 4 and 5 now for investment income. But like we talked about in the past, we have deposits on hand today that are short-term deposits, meaning a couple of years that we have those because of delays in capital projects. We have money on hand that we didn't have 20 years ago to make that investment income on, even though the interest rates at the time were significantly higher than they are today. So that's sort of the history. You can see that it peaked, in the early 2000s, and that's when we had those high interest rates, and then stayed really low for quite some time. And now, this orange line is, what we were estimating, which obviously is very low. And this is when, it went to 700 in 2022, and it went, to over 1 million last year. So, it jumped twice significantly. But I just wanted to show that, yes, it's very high right now, but it does peak and valley, and it has multiple years of unusual. And then the other one I looked at, oops, that's just everything. This is licensing and permits. And so you can see how that kind of goes up and down. And so while I pushed that receipt to be slightly higher, it does, with the economy, the building industry has peaks and valleys. So those were the two that I chose to just really dig into. I can dig into some others, but that is the rationale behind the thinking of why we're conservative, because what you don't want to do, to Bernie's point, was where the actual goes below the estimate, and then you have to make up this difference from somewhere else.
Bernie, do you have follow-up comments?
Just another caveat here. When reference is made to our investment income in the stock market, there isn't, we can't hand our tax money to Warren Buffett and say, here, generate something. We're restricted by law to pretty plain vanilla kinds of instruments, and so we're not as they say in the market, we're not shooting out the lights.
Right. Yeah. So Bernie's referring to the legal list, and that's why most of our short-term investments end up in money markets and CDs. And so that's why I use the CD rate, because that's, and it has to be fairly short-term so that we can pay our bills when they come due too.
Thank you. So we have next on the agenda is the letter, the school committee letter that was sent to us, or response that was sent to us, commenting on the guidelines.
Yep.
I shouldn't say I'm jumping forward. I just want to make sure we were finished with this part.
Yeah, I just I don't think there was a correspondence sent to the council. Am I missing something? Did the council I don't think the school committee sent anything to the council. I didn't think they voted on anything.
No.
No, it was in our packet with that label, but no, it wasn't from the council, right?
I don't
So
think
the
the
school committee hadn't voted on anything. It hasn't been sent yet. So at the moment, there's not a letter to discuss.
Okay.
So this, okay, give me some sense of what you're saying. Is it in our packet where we're supposed to discuss it, or are we supposed to wait?
I think it was included on the agenda in case they had voted and sent it on, so the
Okay.
committee could discuss it. But it was a draft that was included in a school committee agenda, I think a week or two ago.
Okay,
And as far as I know, we haven't received it. They didn't vote on it, so nothing to discuss at the moment.
okay, thank you. I was prepared to ask some questions, and I'll just send the questions in. Okay, next is Council Order FY 2505, an order appropriating funds for a portion of the town's Amherst capital program. And it probably it's best to show that on the screen.
Yeah. So this, as you know, is the council order that for roads that was originally presented back in the fall and then was voted down, and then now was asked to be sent back at a different dollar amount for 500,000 for roads and sidewalks.
Are there any questions or comments about the order? Mandy?
It's not a question. It's a comment on where my vote will be, so I figured I'd put it on the record. I'm gonna vote against recommending this, not because I have a problem with roads and sidewalks, but because I would like to see this transfer in the FY 26 JCPC capital plan to be discussed at JCPC as an additional 500,000. I think it's time that if we're going to be using free cash and end of year free cash excess because of end of year surpluses, that we roll them into the next fiscal year's JCPC process. That doesn't mean that's all I'm going to say. And so I will be voting against it. Here.
Andy?
I guess I'm going to take the opposite perspective and say that I'm going to be voting for it. It is consistent with prior practice of the committee, but most important, every year the cost of construction goes up further. So spending $500,000 and being able to use it during the coming construction season during the summer of 25 is going to be a lot more valuable and do more work, pave more roads than if we hold it and it ends up being in summer of 26. And I think that the delaying it will do that diminishment of value because it'll push it back a year. So I am going to support this.
Alicia?
I think what Mandy said was really interesting, and I'm just wondering if there's any reason why we can't both approve this and see if there can be a discussion at JCPC for the additional 500,000.
Let me quickly respond to that to the extent if we approve that, the money has been spent, so there is not any money for JCPC to consider. And so normally JCPC is looking at the 10.5% flow from that, as well as the road money we get in terms of the budget. And this would be precedent setting. We haven't done it before, with one exception. During COVID, we shifted some money out of reserves into capital so that we could spend some money. But for the most part, this is shifting it out of free cash. So Alicia, if we vote this, the money is not there for JCPC to look at in the context of everything else. And it's also for the current fiscal year, as I understand it, rather than the JCPC is the year that starts in July. This allows us to be spent now. I mean, now, as Andy just described, what the now means, not tomorrow because the roads have ice on them. Was that an explanation? Was that clear?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay. Bob,
I just wanted to point out that this committee can only make a recommendation to the council. The council has to vote this for it to be, you know, an appropriation. So we're just making a recommendation. And I'm going to vote in favor of it because I think I agree with Andy, Andy's comment that it's important to get it done this year.
any other people's comments? Then I have one. Mandy's conceptual idea that if we have, and I did, as people know, I missed a finance committee meeting when we were finalizing the guidelines, and we've left very interpretable wording is the way I would talk about it in surplus. But the idea that if there is surplus at the end of the year, beyond what the targeted funds, that it would go into the capital discussions rather than we would just make an expenditure out of it, was embedded in those guidelines, although it doesn't say thou must. It indicated that we could, and that's something that we haven't done in the past. So Mandy, you know what you're proposing would be new on, rather than spend it now, put it in. And if you put it in, it doesn't become part of roads, it becomes part of the pot, and then becomes allocated back out. So is there better use of it? I would have, like the concept of that the extra free cash decision doesn't get made in an interim period, that instead it gets available for pieces. But since we, as a council, we voted to ask the manager to do this, I'm going to stick with my vote that was asking him to do it, because we did hear quite a bit from residents that this is a high priority for them. So anybody else want to comment before I look to a motion to, as Bob pointed out, this is a motion to recommend to the council that they approve this rather than we're not spending the money right now. Marnie.
We have a chronic shortfall in the kind of infrastructure money that we need, not just for the roads, but for other pieces. You know, whether it's the sewers, whether it's water, whether it's storm drains, culverts. So, you know, I would think that should the JCPC wish to do that, have a discussion about this, they might want to generate a list of priorities for the manager's consideration should surpluses occur. This is some areas where you could target those spending, so it doesn't look like this. We can't call this Christmas in June. It's not. We're constantly short of money for this kind of stuff, and I think we could do better. The JCPC could do better if they developed a priority list of expenditures should new revenues become available. So,
duly noted. And you have two people who will be going from finance to JCPC are taking notes.
Oops, sorry, I took this down.
So are we ready to entertain a motion on this? So I will move that the Finance Committee recommend to the council that the council approve appropriation and transfer order FY 25-05B. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? If not, we're putting it to a vote. And I will go around the room. Andy,
Yes.
Kathy is a yes. Mandy,
No,
Bob,
Yes.
Elisha,
Yes.
and did I get then Tom,
Support.
Bernie,
Support.
and Kathy is a yes. So it's 4 yes, 1 no of counselors, and both of our residents are yeses. Is support. Thank you. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of minutes on this agenda. And when I checked early this morning, they weren't there, and now they are there. So I started to read them, and I see a few of them have either typos or some odd wording in it. So I don't think they're quite ready to approve unless someone went through it with a fine-tooth comb and have edited them. So I think I see Athena's hand is up on these.
We have, thanks, Kathy. We have a new minute taker, and in all honesty, I didn't have a chance to look at all of these. I think I looked at the first set that he sent in. So if you'd like, I can take a look at those and then we can put them on the next agenda. But the first set that's on the agenda should be in good shape because I did edit that extensively.
Okay, I just saw one. I mean, it may be just that if people want to authorize me, I saw one in the March 5th that seemed to have me say the same. It was something I said, and it seemed to be that I said it twice. It might have been that I said it twice, but it's the same. We don't need to do it verbatim on the minutes.
No shade, Kathy, but it could have been the case.
If you
No,
said the
so it's
same
literally
thing,
the same phrasing. So if
yeah, if you said the same thing twice, doesn't matter. I mean, that just.
right, so it
For
was
emphasis. Should
it
we
was
put
in the
emphasis instead?
Is
It was
David
in the-
Byrne,
it
as
was
David
in the-
Byrne said, say
It
something.
was
to
in
this
the
question.
March 5th set, so if people want to give me permission to read it more carefully and just fix it, I don't know whether people had a chance to look at the other 3, and I also looked in back packages. We have many more minutes. They just haven't been on the agenda that had been prepared. They were in draft minute form. So I would like to find out if people would consider a process. If I find out the whole sets of minutes and I give you a list of all of them, that various people raise their hand and take on 1 or 2 to read them quickly, and then we bring them and we could do them as a group. But I'm willing to entertain any other way. I would just like to get through a backlog so we can start fresh on the minutes. So March 5th was the one where I saw some odd wording, and I didn't get a chance to look at April 2nd or May 3rd. So if anyone else got a chance to look at them all and thinks they're fine, then I think we can go. Bob.
I did not have a chance to look at them, but I will volunteer to look through all the older minutes if you want to assemble them, Kathy.
Okay.
Because I kind of feel responsibility that I should have made sure that we approved them. So they weren't sitting in limbo.
So then I see one sort of odd wording that I can work with Athena to fix on March 5th. And it's around Shane, and there are 2 sentences in it. If we want to get through that one, or we can just assign all of them to Bob. And I'm willing to go with any suggestion here. This is, to me, it's housekeeping to get us up to as current as we can. I don't see any other hands. So maybe we'll do the whole set, Bob, including March 5th, so I can just get that to you. Andy.
I was going to just suggest leaving it to the chair and the vice chair to
Okay.
make that decision.
Okay, so we will do that. So then the next item, and I think this is the only final item is a meeting schedule. It appeared that the 2 o'clock on Tuesday worked for everyone. We're in the past, and I shouldn't say in the past because it's probably varied, that 2 o'clock Tuesday was right after the council meeting, which gave us time, a lot more time than Bob had in the past year. For if there was a report to write, we could write the report and we could all look at it. So if that was the case, the next council meeting is next week. So we're off a cycle. So I don't know how important or not important people are, but every other Tuesday. And then as people know in May, it's more intensive in May. Mandy.
Yeah, I mean, it's always easier to talk when we have it dated out, but I would prefer a regular schedule that isn't necessarily attached to the council meetings, because council meetings are not always 1 and 3. And
Okay.
so it would make it, I would prefer something that is like 2 and 4 or 1 and 3, and sticks to it unless there's an actual holiday on a Tuesday. Except obviously when May comes around, we are likely once a week, if not twice a week.
So Mandy, your suggestion is either the first and the third week or the second and the fourth week?
Yeah.
And if it was the second and the fourth week, we would meet again next Tuesday, correct?
Then we'd have 3 meetings in February.
Well, yeah, then we would, it's, we can say February is the odd one out and we met this week and then we meet the 4th, but does anyone have any preference of second and third or second and fourth or first and third Tuesdays of the month? Bob.
I think first and third work for me, just so we can count as Councilor Haneke said, we can count on that as we can set our minds to that. And sometimes it'll be the week before the next council meeting, sometimes it'll be 2 weeks before.
Okay, so then I will work with whoever I need to work with, whether it's Athena or Melissa, to get out a schedule that gets us to May, and then we can have a discussion on what the May schedule looks like. But then June, July, August, so the rest of the year will also be this first and third. Did that work for everyone? Yes.
Yeah, let me just interject that typically after we hit the finish line in June, we want to take some time off. So I would maybe make July and August just one meeting per month.
Okay, great. So you're saying that in general it's 2, but it's not. We don't have to meet twice, which is perfect. Yeah. Any other talk or ideas about meeting schedule? Okay. There are no items that weren't anticipated by the chair because I wasn't the chair, but beyond that, there are no last minute items, but I see Tom's hand is up. Tom.
I have a last minute item.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy, for taking on the responsibility, and congratulations on your election. And Bob, thank you especially for your service this past year.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. And thank you for your participation.
Yeah.
So I think we are coming to a close at my count. I think my clock says 3:39. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Also move.
I'll second.
And I will go around for a vote. Andy?
Yes.
Kathy's a yes. Mandy?
Aye.
Bob?
Yes.
Tom?
Sure. Yes.
Bernie?
I object.
Alicia?
Yes.
And I really want to, Melissa and Holly, thank you for the extra work that went into today. And I know the extent you're working behind the scenes, not only is it budget season, but it's a complicated budget season, maybe even more so than in the past. So thank you both very much for being here with us and for what you both do. And with that, we are adjourned at 3:40 in the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.